Hello, class. I know I don't have anybody here with me yet, so I'm just gonna kind of hang out and wait until some other folks come and see what happens. So I'll get the link, copy that, and send it to everybody one last time. Make sure that we don't have anybody on the YouTube. I know this is going to be live, so it's kind of cool. This is my first time doing a webcast, and no, that's not going to work out. I know this is going to be live, so it's kind of cool. This is my first time doing a webcast. When I had the YouTube page open, it was there's a little time lag on that, and so I closed it. And so if you are on the YouTube channel, then you need to go to the Google Hangout link from the Blackboard site in order to come to here. All right, so I'm just going to start talking because this is recorded, and I am hoping that a couple people will join in. Let's see, make sure. Invite people. Just put one more time on Blackboard. All right. Just sending this out to email one more time in case there's people that are trying to join in. Oh, I have one viewer. If you're viewing, I wonder who it is. Can see the chat screen. All right. If you have questions, then please type them in the chat feature and I will try to answer them. But really my goal here is to help you with your self-analysis paper and to give some feedback on some of the assignments. And so the first thing that I want to point out is that the main challenge in the assignments that I have read so far are when I've asked for students to provide an action item. So that means that when I've said, describe a intercultural communication situation that could be challenging, and then what is one thing you could do to improve that communication. A lot of people have been, hello, Caitlin, hello, Wade, glad you're here. I am just now talking about some feedback on previous assignments. And so the challenge that I've seen is the action item. So if you describe the intercultural situation, the challenge that people have had most is in stating, and now this is what you would do to improve that situation. Same on the communication analysis assignment. People did a great job describing the problems in communication, but did not provide adequate and specific things that they could do to improve their communication. And so in your next paper, in the self-analysis paper, you are asked to develop some action items to take. And so I want to make sure that you know how to do that. And so when you're thinking about action items, first, you want them to be rooted in the text and in the things that you're learning. And so, for example, with perception, if you wanted to improve how you were interacting with another person, you might use perception checking techniques where you state what you see happening and then ask for feedback and clarification. And so that would be a specific action item that you could take. In an intercultural communication situation, you may talk about being mindful, but that's more general. So you would say, in this particular situation, I would know that I tend to be more individualistic, and so I need to be mindful of looking out for those who are collectivist and thinking about how they may approach this problem differently. And so you can see how that is more specific than general. So let's jump into the self-analysis paper so that you can see what I'm looking for in that paper. Now, I'm going to try to screen share, but I have never done this before, so if it doesn't work, I apologize. So screen sharing my self-analysis paper. Share. All right. So hopefully you can see this and just hear my voice. And just make sure that I'm seeing that. Okay. Yes. All right. So you can see your paper and what it says. So basically, you're going to be combining a lot of the material that we've already learned so far in the semester in order to maximize your learning in a particular subject area. So it is 3 to 5 pages, and you are describing messages that you may not have already analyzed. All right, that's kind of weird. Okay, let's see. So the first thing that you're gonna do is to describe the message, and then you're gonna analyze and evaluate the message, and then you're gonna develop action items to improve your communication. So I think the hardest part for people to get started will be, what message are you going to choose? And so what I've asked you to do is to review the messages that you take in and send out through a variety of sources. And so you may be an avid social media user, and so that's something that you want to look at, or you may not be into that so much, and so you want to look at a television show or a website or book or radio, or even think about the music that you listen to, or a podcast or something like that. So it doesn't have to be a tweet or something, but it could be a full-length movie if you wanted it to be. But it needs to be in a particular area, and the ones that are listed there: health, beauty, finances, money, religion, politics, romance, sex, and love. So you kind of want to just do some self-reflection there, and then choose a message that you want to focus on. So with that, I'm going to go back to my pretty face. Okay, so when you're doing that, you might just want to scroll through your social media feed and pick up your phone and just say, you know, what am I looking at on Facebook, and what type of messages, or Instagram, or whatever you're using, and just kind of see what is coming towards you. So it could be, for example, I have a feed of The Daily Show. So I could write my whole paper on this one post that just so happens to be something that came up immediately in my feed as I started scrolling through it. So, or you could, you know, scroll through and see if there's any type of themes that come up or other things. For me, there's often something about working out because I teach fitness, and so I see those types of things on my feed. Here, there's another thing from the Today Show about Ludacris, so I could do something on that. So you could, you know, pick out something from there. If you want to use something else, you could think about a book that you're reading, or I've listened to some podcasts, and I might pick out a particular podcast that's been interesting to me recently. I could think about quotes that I have around my home, or just in that I'm interacting with. So for example, I have this, you can see here on my wall. This is, you can kind of see the lighting, but it's a prayer. And so I could actually use the words from that and how that has impacted me. And then you can kind of see there some artwork that I've done that's come out of some of my spiritual practices. And so you can see that those things kind of blend together. So you have a lot of opportunity or options for the first aspect of the paper. So once you narrow down what you want to write your paper on, then you can get started. So let's go back to the screen share of the paper. All right, come on, hold on. There we go. Is that what it looks like? Great. All right. So I've chosen my message, and the first thing that I'm going to do is describe the message using the elements of communication. So you will flip back to your textbook, review chapter 1, and look at that communication model, which is on page 8 in your textbook, and then described on the following pages. So that is this right here, this communication model. That's what you're going to want to use to describe the messages. And so what this goes through are things like, what is the channel that is being used? So if I use the poem on my wall, that channel is a piece of art, right? And so that's very different than if I saw that on social media, or if I said I scrolled through that and on my Twitter feed. So I would need to describe the channel through which that message through which I received that message. I would also want to describe who that message was coming from. And so if it's something like The Daily Show, okay, so that's a mass media message, and it's coming from Facebook, and mainly because I've looked at things that are similar to that. And so the Facebook algorithm is sending that message to me thinking that I'm going to enjoy it, which I often do. So they're smart. And then the other aspects of that, what type of message is it? Is it a meta message? Is it feedback that I got from someone else? Or is this just a general message? Channel noise. So I would want to describe if there is any noise that keeps me from receiving that message effectively. There may or may not be something applicable to that. And then the context, I think, is really important. And so you want to look at the context through which that message is being received. So the environment that it takes place in, the physical context, what you're thinking about, the temporal context, the cultural context. And so, for example, if I'm looking at this prayer on my wall that's talking about being an instrument of peace, and I'm thinking about the context through which we live and some of the cultural things that are going on, then that's going to impact my relationships with people of color. It's going to impact my relationships with people who have been impacted by hurricanes. It's going to impact my relationships and my thoughts about things that are going on currently in the world around me. And so I'm going to apply the message to the things that are going on in my life. And so that's the context. So I've got that, and let's go back to the screen share. All right. So here we're going to scroll down and look at part 2. So the first thing I've done is describe the message, and then I'm going to go into part 2, which says, drawing upon what I've learned about culture, perception, etc., listening, going to analyze the impact of that message. So I want to choose at least 3 concepts from the text to apply to that message. And so within those 3 concepts, I'm going to answer the questions of how this impacts the view I have of myself, others, and how I communicate, and if it's helpful or not. So for example, if I were to use self-fulfilling prophecy, and I'm still on this this prayer thing that I'm looking at, then I might be looking for opportunities to be an instrument of peace, find them, and do them. And so then I'm reinforcing the fact that that's important to me and that's helpful in some way. I might apply the concept of ethnocentrism, and I could look at how I'm formed by my own values, and that I am going to be maybe more critical of people who don't look at the world the same way that I do, and how this message helps me to become more open and to think about how I can be peaceful in a time that there isn't as much peace. I could think about some of the cultural variables and the difference between high and low context culture, and how if there are things that are explicitly stated through low context communication, that I might need to be more careful about the types of words that I would be using in order to be an instrument of peace. And so that would be something that I would be working through. And so as you look at chapter 4 on listening, there'll be other things that you can look at, like empathy and active listening and various things like that. So your goal is to just basically apply at least 3 things that you've learned about to the message and in the context of relationships, and then you'll be answering those questions. So that's the meat of your paper, because you're analyzing and evaluating the message. And so that's worth 60 points. You want to focus the majority of your paper there. And then once you've analyzed and evaluated the message, this is the action item aspect part of it, which I was saying earlier is often the most difficult. And so within that, you're going to say, I need at least 2 things that I want to take away to improve my interpersonal communication in light of this analysis. So if I've realized that I can become more ethnocentric or judgmental because I've received a message, say from the Daily Show, that is critical of certain groups of people, then I am going to need to develop some action item to combat that. So either for example, one thing that I've done is, rather than just getting overwhelmed and cynical, I've subscribed to some emails that tell me ways to take political action, and so I don't get frustrated, and that's an action item that I could take. Another action that I could take is to seek out alternative viewpoints. And so if I find myself using selective perception and continuing to watch the same media over and over on things that I find interesting, then I am going to instead start to open myself up to people who view the world differently. And so maybe I talk to my friend who voted differently than I did, or is from a different socioeconomic class than I am, to listen to their perspective. So I'm seeking out empathy. So those would be 2 descriptions of action items that I could take to improve my communication in light of the messages that I am looking at in this paper. So I want to clearly state the action items and then apply that to the message and describe the potential outcomes of what that new behavior could be. So if I decide to seek out conversations with people who look at political views differently than I do, then that could create tension in my relationships. It could make for some difficult conversations. Or it could also draw me closer to people and provide a new perspective on the world. So I could talk about either of those and what I think could happen. I could say that when I start taking action, that I, find myself feeling more accomplished and meeting new people who have similar viewpoints to me, and I feel like I can actually build relationships and start doing something about a problem that I see happening in the world, or something like that. So, right, you can apply these concepts in a variety of ways. So tips for success: make sure that you proofread your paper. I've seen plenty of discussion boards and other papers that just have not been proofread, and that's a huge pet peeve. Make sure that each part of the paper has a separate section, so it's clearly labeled rather than flowing all together. Bold or italicize course concepts and vocabulary, so I clearly see what's being used and you see what's being used. Use specific examples and show critical thinking. So I'm going to stop the screen share and go back to me. All right. So within that, you can see that this paper is going to take a little bit of thought and work and things that you're going to need to apply. And so one of the things that I recommend doing is start just kind of free writing and talking about what you're going to do, and then go in and highlight and underline the concepts that you want to use that you think are most relevant. So don't try to use like 20 concepts in your paper. I would recommend choosing 3 in that one section and really building upon them. If you find that you don't have enough, then you might add a 4th or a 5th one, but I wouldn't go beyond that. In the action items, really develop the action items, talk about how you see that working out, and maybe even try it and see if that works for you. So that is the paper and what I'm looking for. So do any of you have any questions about that or your specific assignment? Okay, well, I'm not getting any questions. Is there any questions about anything else in the course, what is going on, or how things are going so far that you would like to ask me since you have me in person? Okay, well, since nobody has any questions, and that's pretty much what I wanted to describe about the paper and how it's going to go, then I guess we will be done and I can just conclude the webcast now. Last chance, another 30 seconds or so if you have a question that you'd like to ask me. Anyone? Nope. Bye-bye. All right. Thanks for participating. Have a good night.